serious. What is the scariest unsolved mystery you know about? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. In 2006, 23-year-old Robert Hornbeck, a soldier at Fort Benning, went to Savannah to visit family. He went out bar hopping with a friend. His dad came to pick him up at 3 a.m. His dad called and Robert answered saying, "Dad, I'm on the stairs." Then the call disconnected. He was missing for the next 10 days. In the nearby DeSoto Hilton Hotel, guests started complaining about a terrible smell whenever the air conditioning came on. A worker went down to check the problem and found Hornbeck's body inside the air conditioning unit. He wasn't staying at the hotel. Somehow, he got inside the hotel through an employee entrance door that was supposedly locked, but there was no sign of forced entry. He would have crossed a dark, empty ballroom and gone through a maintenance door. He climbed up 13 steps so steep they were like a ladder. From there, he went down a dark hallway next to the AC unit. He'd have seen 3 panels that opened into the unit, a large one and 2 smaller ones. The police actually checked inside the large one, figuring no one could have gone in the smaller one. When they later checked again, they found Hornbeck had climbed through the middle door, which was only 14 inches wide. Cold air would have immediately blasted him when he opened it. He crawled down through the duct and somehow got past rotating fan blades to crawl even further inside the unit. He was eventually hit by another fan blade and died inside the unit. The police found no signs of foul play, and it was ruled an accident. Someone I knew in high school was at a party. Reports showed that people saw him leaving the house around 1:30 a.m. and was walking home. It was about a 10-minute walk. However, he was never heard from again. A lot of people were questioned. The party had 12 or 13 people attending the party, and he was one of 3 people who left at the same time. Everyone was 16 to 20. They say he only had 2 or 3 drinks. He didn't like to get drunk and never had more than that. No other substances were believed to be at the party. 3 days later, his body appears in a pond in a different neighborhood in the opposite direction of his home. From where the party was and where his body showed up, he had to cross a main street and walk about half a mile unless he walked through backyards. The morning his body was found, there was a report that 2 people had stood outside the pond the morning before and the morning of his body floating to the top of the pond. There was some time spent trying to figure out who those 2 people were, but nothing came of it. It was ruled an accidental death. One of the people at the party was a close friend's sister. She talked about it. She said she truly doesn't know what happened. She just knows that he wasn't remotely drunk, barely tipsy. There's no reason for him to walk in that direction, and she has no idea who might have been at the pond in the morning. On June 4, 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman was taken to Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon by his stepmother Terry, who then stayed with him while he attended a science fair. Terry stated that she left the school at around 8:45 a.m. and that she remembered seeing Kyron walking down the hall to his first class. He never showed up to his first class, a math class, and was instead marked as absent that day. His stepmother went and did some errands and came home to post the photos of her son at the science fair. At 3:30 p.m., Terry and her husband Kane walked with their daughter Kiara to the bus stop to meet Kyron. The bus driver told her he had not boarded the bus. Terry called the school only to be told Kyron had not been seen since early that day and was marked as absent. An exhaustive search has found no trace of him. Stepmother? The case of Todd Gaib, a guy who was at a party with his friends and left to walk home alone. His friends got some weird phone calls from him after he left, and then he was missing for a few weeks, I think. Then weeks later, he was found standing upright in the middle of the lake, like the water up to his shoulders. From what I remember, the cause of death wasn't drowning, so he must have been placed there. Honestly, so effing creepy. I don't know if it's the scariest, but I was always creeped out by the Westfield Watcher. New family moves into a house. They start receiving letters from the Watcher, saying their family has been watching the house for generations. The letter starts getting worse and worse, with threats to the children. It's a disturbingly fascinating story, and I've been following it since it started. Many people believe the father was sending the letters himself because the mortgage payment was too high and was trying to finesse his way out of the contract, but who really knows for sure? Brandon Lawson. He disappeared in the middle of nowhere on a highway near San Angelo, Texas in 2013. He made a 911 call out of breath and running, clearly being chased. I believe the recording is on YouTube. The call suddenly cuts off, and there's been no sign of him since. The 911 call is spooky. You can tell the dude is afraid. The case of the boy in the box. It's not necessarily scary, but every time I see photos of that boy, I get the most uncomfortable feeling in my stomach. My heart starts racing every time. It makes no sense to me. There are far worse cases involving children that don't bother me. I've seen terrible crime scene photos and live leak videos, etc. I've heard so many awful ways people have died and so many unsolved mysteries. I love everything true crime related, but something about seeing photos of that particular little boy versus other people or children haunts me every time I see it. I actively avoid reading about or listening to people talk about this case. It's a shame it's not solved. All the evidence of what happened is there, they just can't definitively prove it. Near the house I grew up in, a little girl around 3-ish went missing. Her mom ran inside to get the phone while her daughter was outside, came right back out, and she was gone. The older brother was in the house and didn't see anything. It was a matter of minutes. From what I remember, they eventually found the little girl's body long afterwards. It was during the 80s when science for investigating things was more limited, especially when it was long after the event had occurred. They never found the person responsible, and so never found the motive, knew any details, or even exactly what happened. My aunt told me the story because she was good friends with the mother and at the house with her when it happened. I still think about that mother sometimes and wonder where she's at mentally with the whole thing. I can't even imagine a situation like that. I don't know the name of the guy, but it's that a guy was recording himself going through a pitch-black tunnel full of human bones, which are the tunnels in Paris where they buried 6 million people. He was going through the tunnels, walking between chambers full of dead bodies, and he seemed relaxed until something spooked him, and he started sprinting away. They found his camera, which the recording showed he had dropped it while running away in a panic. No one ever knew what spooked him, and his body was never found. Most parts of those tunnels are blocked, so it's believed he got illegally in through some sort of tunnel or vent. Mass grave found in Liverpool of thousands of simple wooden coffins stacked tightly in a cube shape. The dead were all adults, no children. The coffins were all removed pretty quickly after discovery, and not much more was ever discovered. The leading theory is that the deceased were Irish immigrants, and that the reason there were no children is that they would have been shipped off to Australia. Quite what caused the adult's demise isn't known. Also, special mention to the man in the pipe, also from Liverpool. A man in Victorian dress was found lying inside a sealed-up pipe with his head resting on a brick, as if he'd just climbed in and fallen asleep. Both stories have been covered by local folklorist Tom Slemen. When I was like 11, I was over my neighbor's house playing Resident Evil and it got dark, so I had to run down his driveway and loop around from the street to come up my gravel driveway to the back of the house because we didn't use the front door. Across the street is just straight woods, so fear was a little jacked up from the video game. Now, the back of my house is sort of a porch-like area that is walled around with a screen door and windows. The house is lit up, and there's a little moonlight. I walk up these old blue painted steps to get to the screen door, and it's locked. I'm sitting there thinking like, shit, how did my parents lock me out like, huh? So, to my left there's the side yard that is fenced, and a deck that is connected to the porch. Then I hear my name from said side yard, Doug. To me it sounded like my dad, so I answered, Dad? And didn't get any response. So I figured like, okay, I'll climb over the fence because the fence door was locked too for some reason. I get to the top and pushed myself, so I roll over the top, lifting myself with my arms, and I sort of fall onto the grill and make some noise. I keep it from falling over and then look up to the yard and expect to see my father, but there's nothing. For some reason I'm chilling, like, okay, that's weird, but maybe I'm just hearing things. I tried the second screen door from the deck and that's locked too. Then I hear it, Doug. Every hair in my body stood up. I slowly turned around and my eyes immediately went to this huge tree opposite of where I was on the other side of the yard, like that was where the voice came from. Right to the crotch of the tree. It's dark, like the blackest black, and it seems like there's barely any moonlight now, just the deck light over me. I can't make it out, but there's something in that tree looking at me condorish. I freak the F out and slam myself into the screen door, knocking it off its hinges and landing on all fours. I don't even look behind me. I run to the sliding door and it's locked. So I head to the window to the kitchen on my right and rip up the screen and leap through onto my back. I sprinted to the living room and hid under a coffee table until my mom came downstairs. I don't know what happened that night. Anytime I hear something related to the Jersey Devil or Skinwalkers, that memory comes back to me. This was in South Jersey. I'd like to believe I just imagined it. Cindy James was a 44-year-old nurse who began to experience troubling moments of harassment that began with creepy calls to scary notes that continually escalated over 7 years to violent attacks. However, authorities didn't believe her, despite numerous troubling accounts that included James being found strangled with nylon, drugged, and stripped on the side of the road, and other terrible acts of abuse that even included a house fire while guests were staying over. Cindy James ultimately disappeared, and her body was found dead weeks later near an abandoned house, hogtied with nylon around her neck. Her death was ultimately determined to be from an overdose of morphine, which caused police to frustratingly rule it as a suicide, even though she had been tied up and had previous reports of being drugged. Suicide? It's not a public mystery, as it involves myself. When I was 14, I went to a training camp for football or soccer with my whole team. One evening after dinner, we were in our rooms. Mine I spent with 4 friends. Apparently, mid-conversation, I got up from my bed and walked out of the room without saying a word. Now, there should be stated that I'm a diabetic, type 1, and if my sugar gets too low, I sometimes do weird stuff. So I walk outside and down the hallway to a window and just stand there. My friend finds me, asks if I'm okay, to which I didn't answer. According to him, I was kind of growling and gripping a pole next to the window as if I was choking someone. Now he says that he would get the others, and when they return, I'm gone. On the other side of the building, one finds me again, but as he gets the others, I disappeared again and somehow got back into our room. They return there. As they walk through the door, I ask them where they have been. Now, I should say I don't remember anything of that. They told me and said they were scared shitless. I'm still wondering what happened back there and would really like to know what caused me to do this stuff, as the reason was not my diabetes. Tristan Brubach, 13. This is some truly awful shit. Tristan was walking home through a local park and was brutally murdered. What's weird about this is that not too long before his murder, he was happy and healthy and petting an elderly lady's dog. He then walked down a dark tunnel and was attacked. When a young girl found his body, it was laying over a grate that leads to the sewer, and the girl described hands reaching up from the grate and grabbing his body. Tristan was stabbed and had evidence of chunks of his flesh being eaten. When the police checked the sewer, they found nothing. What's so awful about this is the idea that a random man jumped out of the sewer, attacked, and then ate parts of Tristan and got away. The recent murder in Atlanta, Georgia. A 40-year-old bartender got off work and went to walk her dog around 2 a.m. in the most popular park in Midtown. Her body is found stabbed over 50 times, disfigured and mutilated with the word fat carved into her chest. She was found by her wife, who tracked her phone using Find My iPhone when she didn't come home. Her dog was also stabbed to death. Despite this huge park being in the wealthy center of the city, all the surveillance cameras around the parks did not work. Her body was only found 250 feet from a main road and probably a 3-minute walk to a hub of bars and restaurants open late. In interviews with the wife, she talks about paying off debts using the GoFundMe donations. That's the only hint of any possible explanation to me. No other evidence was found, and no additional surveillance footage has been recovered. This happened in July 2021, and still no information. Some people think official sources are holding out and that the word slut was carved, not fat, and that the body was dismembered. I had dog sat for a childhood friend on the corner from where the victim was murdered just 3 days prior, and had taken her dog to the park at the exact spot where the victim was murdered when it was dark. I got creepy vibes and ran back. All around, so scary. Maybe it's the wife.